The first speaker today is Dr. Roger Kotila. Roger is a PhD psychologist who's worked in community health for the state of California as well as in private practice. He is the Vice President of the World Constitution and Parliament Association, and he's chairperson of the board of Democratic World Federalists. So let's welcome Roger Kotila.
Hey Roger, introduce Fritz and tell him what his job is.
This is going to be a little bit of a long program, so bear with us, but Fritz Pointer there is going to be our timekeeper, and for all of us speakers, he's going to let us know when we're at 10 minutes. Bear with us today because I think some of the ground we're going to cover is pretty important. I would just mention to you the name of John Bolton.
Oh, Lord. Oh, you're messing up right there.
I'm dedicating my talk to John Bolton because law and world law is important, and he thinks that America, the United States government, we should be above the law. Wasn't that just great? So I want to point out that for the Earth Constitution and the World Constitution Parliament Association, it's an honor to be on this program with CodePink, who I consider some of the best activists in the country. I was at a meeting of psychologists for social responsibility a couple weeks ago, and they were honoring Medea Benjamin of CodePink. And afterwards, I went up to Medea and I said, Medea, could we get CodePink to start paying attention to the United Nations? And to my surprise, she looked at me and she said, what do you want us to do? Wow. And that took me by surprise. My response was, raise hell. I'd also like to draw attention to Dwayne Young, who will be talking today. He's pretty important because his ideas, if we manage to get rid of this war system that we're in, ideas like coming from Dwayne Young will answer the question of what will these soldiers and so on do if we end war? What will they do for jobs? What will be the alternatives? And Dwayne's program really helps answer that. It's very important. All right, the Constitution for the Federation of Earth. The guardian angel and the organizing agent is a group called the World Constitution and Parliament Association. I'm a vice president. I stumbled across this Earth Constitution years ago when we were doing radio in San Francisco, and someone sent me a constitution. It sat on my desk for 6 months. I started looking at it, and I went, whoa, wait a minute. This looks kind of interesting. Now, as an activist, like many of you here, and most of you here, I think, are kind of seasoned activists, you know that we're stuck with, we put out one fire here, stop one war here, and then another one pops up there. We're dealing with poverty here, but we got the war machine there, so we can't afford to deal with the poor people, and they tell us we can't have health care, free health care, and they tell us that we can't afford to send the kids to college free. Why? Because of the war machine. Then we got climate change. All right, so human rights and poverty, climate change, and then the nuclear bombs, like Livermore Lab, is getting all prepared for the next 30 years to destroy us. There's two levels of activism. Many of you are working on the immediate problems, trying to slow down the war machine, trying to make sure people get health care. That's all very important. For 2 years, I lived and worked with the homeless. But I moved over to this idea of a world constitution for the reason that I'm looking at this and saying, well, how can we kill 3 or 4 birds with one stone? And the answer is what Einstein and other world federalists had said many years ago. The answer is world government. I found it interesting when Truman dropped the bombs in Japan, that was just about the time we signed the UN Charter, right between that signing. And the World Federalists right away realized that the UN Charter wasn't going to work. And the World Federalists I would go so far as to say that the World Federalists all along have known the problem, what's wrong, and we know what to do about it. That might be a big pill to swallow. Okay. World Constitution and Parliament Association in 1958 started making plans to write a world constitution to replace the UN Charter. This went on for 30 years. People from 25 countries, 5 continents got together, and they wrote what they called at the time the Constitution for the Federation of Earth. It's a model world federal union government. At the spiritual level, it's important because we're talking about the need for world union. Now, world union does not mean that everybody has to like each other. If you think about a global family or a family, some people in your family you don't really like, but you put up with them. And when I say world union, it'll be the same thing with the nations. So that's one aspect of what this Constitution does. It calls for a world parliament, a democratic world parliament, so it brings democracy into the picture because we, the people, have no real voice in terms of what they're doing at the global level. This Constitution aims for problems that have to be solved at the global level. Problems at the national and local level will remain with the nations and with the localities. Now, the Earth Constitution also calls for decentralization. And a lot of people worry that, oh, if we get a world government, we'll have some kind of dictator. And this particular Constitution is not a presidential model. We will have no Donald Trump, thank you. In fact, there won't be a president at all because it's a parliamentary model. It's not a presidential model. In addition to that, the shot callers are a democratically elected world parliament. The present system, the Security Council at the UN, are the shot callers. Now, this gets us into law and order. It just dawned on me the other day that I was looking, the Security Council are the biggest world weapons dealers in the world. And it suddenly occurred to me that the present geopolitical system with the UN Security Council, actually we're talking about a criminal cabal. The P5, the United States, Russia, China, Great Britain, they're the biggest warmongers on Earth. And they got it good because the way they've designed the UN Charter is that they're above the law. 3 minutes, good. Fritz, you're doing a good job over there.
Just see if you do a good job.
So the Earth Constitution contains a very well thought out world judiciary system with enforcement. Part of what's wrong with the present system is there's no sheriff in town at the global level. What this means is that leaders of countries and the generals can invade countries, overthrow democratically elected governments, commit assassinations via the drones, or via poison, I guess, commit false flag operations like 9/11, and get by with it. No one ever goes to jail. You can look at the Israeli-Palestinian situation where the Israelis get to steal the land of the Palestinians, take their homes. Nobody goes to jail for it. So that's got to change on the global level. And one of the things I like about the Earth Constitution is that it addresses that with an enforcement system applied to individuals. If it was in power right now, what would happen is people like George Bush Jr. would be in jail. Possibly Obama, I hate to say that, but probably. Clinton, and so on and so forth. They would be in jail where they belong. Should I say this publicly? Where they belong for what they've done, like in the Middle East. So that's kind of the essence of the Earth Constitution, but I want to show you something here. The first speech I ever gave about the Earth Constitution. I went in front of the audience and I said, this is a gift that WCPA is giving to humanity. Well, the gift here, of course, is the Constitution for the Federation of Earth. And Professor Glenn Martin, one of my colleagues, who has written a great deal about the Earth Constitution, had this to say about the Earth Constitution. He says, the 20th century produced what may well be the most important document for the 21st century and the future of human civilization. He's referring to what we now call the Earth Constitution. For those of you who are environmentalists and worried about the climate, the Earth Constitution is the first green constitution ever drafted. And it's all in here, the idea of sustainability and all of that. So with that, I shall stop.
All right.
So we've got some minutes scheduled for questions now. Any questions? Daniel? Speak loudly, please.
Yes, I have been confused by the name World Federalist because I've heard reference to a World Federalist organization that is right-wing. Now, I was trying to Google the name and I couldn't find it.
You're probably thinking of the Federalist Society.
Thank you. Yeah.
And they are right-wing. That's not us. We're the opposite.
Thank you.
But they're supporting both, aren't they? This idea that we're above the law. Dr. Hansen.
Is the Constitution on the website so people can bring it up and look at it and print out a copy, or how do they get a copy?
Yes, you can get the Constitution off the internet. If you go to one of my websites, which is back there, earthfederation.info, it'll guide you to where you need to go to look at the Constitution. I encourage you to read it because there's some pretty interesting stuff in there. Like, we have a group that's working on a United Nations Parliamentary Assembly to join the UN and the General Assembly. Now, what they haven't considered yet is what authority, if you actually get a people's parliament, what authority do you want to give them? Do you want to just limit it to stopping war and making war illegal? Do you want to limit it to outlawing nuclear weapons, which I'm highly in favor of? I think it's criminal to be working on nuclear weapons. Do you want them to have the authority over the banking system, over the international bankers? And I can just go on about the questions of what authority should we, the people, if we get a world parliament, what authority should we have? Okay, yes.
Are you incorporating the rights of nature in the Constitution that the indigenous people have? I think they have that adopted by the United Nations.
Well, as a green constitution, a lot of the elements are there, but I think it could be improved. It's not as specifically stated as I think it could be and should be.
What was the question?
If the indigenous people's point of view on nature, if it's in the Earth Constitution. And I'm saying I think we could do a better job on that end. Yes?
As a can-do person, the question is, if people wanted to get involved with your group, what kinds of things would people do?
Well, I'd start with reading the Earth Constitution first to see if you agree with it. Then what I'd like to see activists do is almost any of the actions you're taking, I think it'd be helpful if you would simply cite the parts of the Earth Constitution that apply to what you're doing. So we start getting publicity. Because if we have our way, the day will come at the United Nations where the General Assembly will vote on whether or not they're going to have a charter review. And Dr. Hansen will talk about that some. That's going to open the door. We're going to have to reach out to these other nations. There's a lot of nations that are sick and tired of getting blackmailed at the UN. And we're going to have to reach out to them. Yes, back there. And last question.
you said the directorship would be from democratic countries. That excludes China. And then you call China warmongering. Why?
China will be included, Russia will be included. The democracy part comes at the World Parliament level, where the delegates to the World Parliament will vote on various world legislation. But we're not going to say that only so-called democratic countries can participate in the World Parliament. The reason for that is, well, for one reason, the United States isn't a democracy. We're an oligarchy. So we couldn't even be in it. But the other reason is you need all the countries there. What happens once you start treating them with respect, look at Vietnam. We are killing them, and then we let them go free, and they're half capitalistic now. The same thing would happen in Cuba if we leave them alone. The same thing would happen in Venezuela if we wouldn't be overthrowing them. So, I hope that answers your question. Our hope would be that these nations would get more and more democratic as we got more world peace. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Roger.